My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE-USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's IEEE-USA webinar, AI Unpacked, What Leaders Need to Know to Stay Ahead. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. Our presenter for today is career coach and best-selling author Elizabeth Lyons, who returns to us to discuss another exciting topic. Elizabeth stands apart in the coaching realm as a three-time best-selling author of transformative books like I Quit, Working for You Isn't Working for Me, and Hear Us Roar. Her focus isn't just on coaching, it's on revolutionizing career trajectories. With over 2 decades immersed in talent acquisition, she possesses an unparalleled understanding of the corporate landscape. This unique perspective allows her to predict hiring, firing, and promotion patterns, giving clients an insider's advantage. Her clients span the elite echelons of major corporations like FIS, Microsoft, and Amazon, attributing their successes to her coaching. Whether it's decoding the intricacies of career advancement, skillfully managing career crises, or nurturing leaders to ascend to their next level, Elizabeth's coaching delivers transformative, career-defining results. Without further ado, I will now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome back, Elizabeth. We're very excited to hear what you have in store for our audience today.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this presentation. I'm really happy to be here. IEEE is doing some really great cutting-edge stuff in robotics, in AI, in machine learning. There's just so much great content that you're rolling out for all the members. It's very exciting to be a part of this. And I'm a very small part of this, but I want to contribute where I can here. So I want to tell you how this came about. So probably 2 months ago or so, like everybody else, I got nervous about AI and machine learning and what's going to happen and what's going to happen to my job and what's going to happen to everybody's job. And I think what happens is we read these snippet headlines and we get these tiny little sound bites without all the details. And we get afraid, frankly. And so what I decided to do was really immerse myself in some learning to understand what is it. What originally started my quest, honestly, was cybersecurity. And what I was trying to understand originally was how will AI and machine learning dovetail into cybersecurity? What skill sets will be prevalent? What will not? What are we going to automate? What is this going to look like in the future? And I could not really find anything on that. So I thought I need to back up and just understand at a very high level, like an executive would, what is AI, period. Like, let's start there. What is this stuff? And what I found was after taking literally 15 or 20 hours conservatively of classes, what I found was understanding that made me less afraid. And really the reason that I wrote this is to explain it very simply. So if you're a technologist, this is probably not for you. This is going to bore you. You might cut it to pieces. It's not for you. This is really AI and machine learning for the rest of us, that we think we know what we're talking about, but we don't know what we're talking about. And we hear our companies are implementing this or that, but we have no idea what the heck they're doing. So this is a very simple overview around AI. And in the end, I definitely have some data to share about how it will shape work as we know it. What's kind of the hot skill sets that are going to come up, what's going to, automate and maybe go away, or pieces of jobs that are going to go away. And ultimately, I think that's why everybody's joined this call, is because they're like, what's going to happen to me? So my name is Elizabeth Lyons. I am the author of 3 books. First one was called Recession Proof Yourself. The second one is called I Quit, Working for You Isn't Working for Me. And the third one is called Hear Us Roar, Unapologetic Women Leading in Corporate America. The funny part about that book was I thought I wrote a book about women's leadership, and apparently I wrote a book for everybody because there's a lot of male executives that have bought it, read it, gave it away. So it's a very unifying book, if you will. So today we're going to talk about AI, how it's going to shape where we're all at. What is this? So our agenda, very simply at a high level: what is Gen AI? What is machine learning? How does machine learning work? What are algorithms anyway? Who makes them? Does this machine just run wild with this stuff, or is there a person that programs this? How does this work, right? Just very simply, why are we so afraid of this stuff? Like, ultimately, what is the root of our fear? And will this impact my job, and how? So I want to kick off with the fear. And I can't say it enough. Once you understand something, the fear goes way down. And I find that with everything, whether it's our jobs or skill sets that are going to change, or things that might even happen in our relationships or family, what we don't understand, we immediately go into fear and panic and make up all kinds of scenarios that may or may not be true or may not play out. And so I think it's good to just address, what are we really worried about? Let's get some language around it. Let's get some words on a slide and just go, yeah, that does scare me. So the first reason that we fear AI is really when we get into privacy laws, compliance, we get into data privacy. Where's our data going? That you're going to hear that constantly the next year. Data privacy, data lock, DLP, labeling, protection. You're going to hear a lot about that. Vulnerabilities in AI systems like cyber attacks, the misuse of AI for hacking or fraud, black box models, theft of the algorithms, somebody taking them and doing something very malicious. And I can explain more about that later in the presentation. Errors from poor training data, limited models, right? We've got a person that's actually programming this stuff. How good are they? Are they catching things that could happen with this? If machine learning gets in there and takes off and makes its own decisions, how good is the data scientist working on this? The automation of jobs scares all of us, I think. And also just that AI might not align to our long-term business goals. For example, if you're in advertising, or if you're an artist, or if you're a actor, you might not like this at all, right? Because you want to have your own creative talent. So I think that's the other reason why we all get really scared and uncomfortable with this. The reason we're scared and uncomfortable is because we don't even understand the most basic thing I can tell you right here is AI is a big umbrella term. It could mean machine learning. It could mean deep learning. It could very simply mean automation. And automation is different than machine learning. And so I think when you read headlines and you're reading articles, everything talks about AI, but we don't really understand what that is. And we miss the most important part I've learned was it's an umbrella term. So it encompasses a lot of different things. And I think that's important to remember before we start to run away with, oh, there goes my job, now I'm in trouble. Because what it might be is your company is automating processes and not doing deep machine learning where an entire skill set would go away. Some skill sets will go away, but not all of them. And I think that's important to understand. First thing I would ask myself if I were you is, where I work, what are they automating? How does that impact my job? How does that impact my ability to do my job? Is it automation or is it pure machine learning? And what does that look like? So then it comes, what's automation? So automation is repetitive tasks. So think about things that you would want to automate very simply. IT processes are a great place to start, honestly, where you have a process that a person goes in there and sets it up. For a great example would be patching. Let's say you need to patch software. And you've got this window where you have to patch. I think everybody in IT knows all about the windows, right? And having to work weekends, 1 weekend a month or whatever it is, and get it in patch. some of that can be automated. It's a repetitive task that's going to happen that you're going to remove human error, and it's going to be more seamless, and it's just going to automate and take care of it. When I think about automation and skill sets, I always think of Python scripting, always, or Shell or Bash. That's what I think of in terms of skills. So if you're thinking about what skills, or you're kind of listening for what's going to happen in the future, those are good skills to have in terms of automation if you're in IT. Artificial intelligence, on the other hand, really focuses on creating machines that are capable of performing complex tasks that can require decision making. So now we're getting more into machine learning. Examples of that could be fraud detection, self-driving cars. Now you've got an actual program or a machine that's going to learn from itself over and over again and make decisions and do tasks or make decisions on either data or like robotics sort of thing. So machine learning, very simply, it learns from the data that's already in there. And I think the most important thing to understand is, you're like, well, how does a person do this? It's like the sci-fi movies of 30 years ago. Do the machines take over the world and we're just done here? No, a data science, a people actually adds the algorithms that starts to trigger that machine learning. And that's how that starts. So machine learning is really a branch of artificial intelligence that enables the algorithms to uncover hidden patterns within the data sets and then make decisions and conclusions and learn from that. So it's a learning piece, where automation is, set it up and it goes and it does itself. It's not learning anything. You've programmed it to say, okay, in this process, follow these steps. When you get to this step, yes or no, then you do these steps, and it kind of cascades down. That's different than machine learning. Machine learning is where people start to get afraid, because I think people get afraid because they're out of control, right? And they don't know how this is all gonna work out, frankly. So now my next question, as I was learning all this, is like, well, where is machine learning being utilized right now? Like right now today, where it's probably everywhere and I don't even know it's happening. So when I first came across it, to be honest with you, it was probably 10 years ago. I hired fraud detectors. They were actually called like machine learning modelers. They were called I want to even say predictive modelers. And so these were very high level data scientists that went in to financial service companies. And what they did was they made models that could detect fraud within a credit card application. And they could figure out if there would be fraud in that credit card application. They could figure out if a person should be given a credit card based off of their credit history and all that sort of stuff. The very first time I ever saw machine learning, I actually was hiring this. People didn't even understand it. It was very interesting. Now I really understand it. But that's where you'll see it. You'll see it in pockets of banking, true machine learning. Predictive modeling is where the machine learns and can be used to build those predictive models that can help decisions to make better decisions. So like Amazon's a great example of that, where, you like this white blouse. Well, here's the same blouse in 6 different colors. How about that? That could be a machine learning kind of piece of it. You'll also see it in computer vision, like self-driving cars is another great example of that. Now, that's not going great. I think we've all seen the self-driving cars in San Francisco that were in the parking lot that just kept going around in the circle and kind of bumping into things. So we've got some work to do there, but that's another example of machine learning where it's making decisions. It's making decisions, turn left, turn right, whatever it is, stop at the stop line, etc. So then the next question to me is, so if machine learning uses algorithms, what's an algorithm? What is that all about? So an algorithm is just a well-defined sequence of steps or instructions designed to perform a specific task for a particular problem. From what I understand, and I don't know everything, there are like a handful of very basic algorithms. And then there's others that can be created, but it's kind of like your basic formula. And then data science can get in there and tweak it. So we'll tweak it so maybe the car isn't it doesn't hit the curb or whatever the issue is. So the algorithms really is what we should probably be worrying about more than anything. This slide, what I really wanted to show you more than anything else was there are people that do this, not machines running away with ideas and controlling the world. So how do algorithms work? There is a person that collects all the massive amounts of data in a company, right? They've got a problem or they've got something they want to solve or what have you. Somebody goes in and finds all the massive amounts of data and collects it. They process that data. They choose a model. So that model could be classification, regression, clustering. There's different kinds of models. They figure out what they want to do with that data. They choose a model for that. Then they train and evaluate that model. See, we still got a person doing this. It's still a data science person. They fine tune that. And then it will move into prediction. In other words, making decisions. It's going to learn from itself. When you're talking about machine learning, that's how that works. Machine learning within itself, I learned that I'm sharing with you today, actually has a life cycle, which made a lot of sense to me because when you think about anything in IT, it has a life cycle. We used to call it cradle to grave, right? With manufacturing, we call it the same thing, cradle to grave. So overall, when you talk about machine learning, this will make a lot of sense to you as this breaks down. You define the problem, right? What are we trying to solve? What are we trying to fix? What are we doing here? Are we saving time? What's our purpose here? Then you gather that necessary data from the various sources. And trust me, there'll be a lot of it. The biggest piece from the data scientists I've spoken to and the high level, frankly, machine learning experts that I know, the data cleaning and processing is a big chunk of the job, making sure that data is doesn't have any problems in it, doesn't have any outliers, doesn't have any quirks, frankly, in that data. So they clean that very carefully. And then they enhance the data features and select relevant ones to improve the model performance. So they're constantly going through and looking at this data and editing it, making sure it's clean. Because think about it, you're only as good as your data. I mean, that's it. And the machine is only going to learn from that. It doesn't have any bias. It doesn't have any opinion. It's just going to do what you tell it to do and go from there, whether it's machine learning or automation. Then the big piece is they choose hopefully the correct model that's suitable based on the problem that you have and the characteristics of it. They train that model. Then we're down into, QA, right? We're evaluating that model. We're tuning it. We're deploying it, and then we're going to monitor it and maintain it. So the machine learning itself has a life cycle within itself. Now, within machine learning, there are two types. One is supervised. So supervised is just that. You're programming it. You're taking supervised algorithms and training it on that labeled data set. It's not making any decisions. And then unsupervised is where, yes, it starts to make decisions because it's learning from those patterns. It's learning from those data. And then it like the car drives itself or, whatever it is. So algorithm bias, I definitely want to talk about that a minute. And I think the great place to start on this is the definition of bias, because I think for 10 years, we've kind of heard this word bias and unconscious bias, and bias is bad and you're not a good person. And I mean, it's just like, we have a whole bunch of feeling around the word bias. And so I want to take a time out right now and really talk about what does that mean? So when I looked up what does the word bias mean, it literally says partial, favoritism, influence, sway. Okay. So the bottom line, though, when you get into algorithm bias is how it is programmed is how it's going to read it. It doesn't have any opinion or judgment or what have you. So as good and clean as that data is as good and as clean as your results would be. It's very simple, but it's that simple, and it makes that kind of sense, which is why there's a lot of emphasis on the algorithms and making sure that we don't have things like discrimination. Great example in that would be Amazon. Years ago, they put in some machine learning into their application. And what they found was certain applicants were getting favored and others weren't. In terms of visibility, in terms of interviews. And they immediately took it out of their tools and was like, we're not ready for this because it's biasing towards white males. Well, for 25 years that I've been kicking around in IT and engineering, I'm sorry, but it was mostly males and it was mostly white. So, it's just pulling the data and going, yeah, this is probably a good candidate, this isn't, and what have you. And now all of a sudden we got a massive problem with discrimination, right? Part of it is, the world has changed. The data that we're looking at 25 years ago on hiring trends is very different than today in the United States. And our laws and our hiring practices have certainly changed. So I guess my point here is don't get mad at the algorithm. Don't get mad at the data science. The data is the data, but if it's not carefully looked at and that algorithm isn't tweaked properly, if it's not managed and monitored properly, you can get into some big problems, which is why you'll see there's some industries that are very slow to adopt or implement heavy duty machine learning into their companies, like banking and financial is going to be slower to go than some of the other companies, and carefully placing it where it's going to be effective and utilized and frankly not hurt anybody. Healthcare is another great example. I came across an article this weekend on Humana, and I think it was United Healthcare as well. I might be wrong on that, but I distinctly remember Humana because my friend works there. And they have a massive lawsuit that's pending as of December of last year because they denied claims and they had a bad algorithm. And so people were getting discharged from hospitals and had to pay on their own pocket. And there was this huge, massive class action suit. And it's really based on their model is wonky. And they don't have a person on the back end verifying that model saying, no, this person is not able to be discharged from the hospital and go into another care center or what have you. They need to be here and we need to cover this. And those are the kinds of concerns when you start to get into the algorithms and what can happen. Financial loss, that we're always looking at the stock market. That's a concern. Are the algorithms going to get in the stock market and make that wonky? Security is a big one. We're always concerned about a flawed algorithm might detect something falsely one way or the other. And now you've got a real issue in cyber. Customer dissatisfaction, recommending a product that's great and it's not, and that causes problem. Going back to healthcare again, detecting cancer. And there's some really great things in terms of the capabilities of detecting disease, but you certainly don't want to be telling somebody they need an operation or they need chemo when your algorithm is off, or deny them a claim, right? So there's a lot of good places it can be, but it's really about slowing down and getting it into the right areas and having the right people look at this, which brings up a whole other topic I'm not going to get into, which is AI, machine learning, and ethics. And there are some really phenomenal classes out there that I found really interesting around the ethics of AI. I'll throw this question out there. It's actually called the trolley theory. Trolley, like train, is what it is. When you look at the self-driving cars, it's like the self-driving car is programmed. And so it sees something in the road. It's a person, it's a dog, or the other option is to turn left and go off the cliff and kill the driver. What are we going to do? That's an ethics question, right? And you can bang around that all day, right? You don't want to, the dog is less important, right? The person isn't. Well, how old is the driver? Are they contributing to society? It can get really crazy in these ethic courses, but it raises a lot of good questions. And then it starts to come down to, how are we going to regulate this? How are we going to regulate this? How's the United States going to regulate this? Europe has actually started to implement some laws around it. I've been watching that very closely. It's very interesting. So that will all impact us in the future. So the ethics around AI are interesting. And if you're interested in that sort of stuff, there's some really great classes on LinkedIn Learning. I highly recommend Doug Rose. I took several and got several certificates. But my favorite is probably Doug Rose. He's a technologist. He's very easy to understand. He can get very detailed, or he can be very high level, but I find him to be personable and really smart and great. So if you want to take a couple classes, I'd highly recommend things on LinkedIn Learning, and that particular instructor I liked. So now we're getting into the piece about, well, what about us, right? Where are the jobs? So I just pulled an article before I came on this webinar. I tried to get something that was really current. And this is what they're reporting, which makes sense to me when I look at it. Where you're going to see complete job loss or high risk would be in like logistic and warehouses. When you look at the robotics today, when you look at workman's comp claims and repetitive tasks on the body, the robotics now have come to a place, particularly I think it's Boston Robotics I've been watching the last couple of years. They've come to a place where the robot can climb, stairs, can pick up a package, can put it away. A lot of those big warehouse jobs, frankly, I always look at Amazon. At what point are they going to start to replace workforce with robotics? Because that fundamentally, from a business perspective, makes sense. That's that. And the report said that's where you're going to see it. The other place where you're going to see high risk and job loss would be retail, supermarkets. Do we really need cashiers? We self-checkout as it is. Restaurants, a lot of fast food restaurants are already starting to implement some of that as well. We can't find the skill set anyway, and what you can, again, we just get into workman's comp and absenteeism and hiring and firing and all the other stuff. You can actually eliminate the people dynamic there pretty seamlessly. And I don't think the general public is going to care one way or the other, to be frank with you. Professional services, this is interesting. High risk and job loss, legal research, 140,000 positions they were predicting. And then automated accounting systems. So some pieces of accounting would go away. Like you wouldn't need like a full-blown accountant. Very interesting. My husband and I were talking about retirement planning. And I said to him, I'd really like to talk to somebody. And he very quickly goes, there's software for that. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure there is. I still want a person. He's like, I don't know, man. The person has the software. I would just get a software. And so, I'm a relationship person, so I like to talk to experts in their field, right? So I did. I went out there and I just kind of Googled retirement software, and I found some really great choices for not a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, I don't know that I need that planner now. I mean, it's the same information, and they're going to use a tool and plunk in numbers, and you start to really wonder when you get into those areas of the professional services. In terms of job growth, what I have read over and over again the last month, and what I just saw before I came on this webinar, is we need people, we need leaders that are going to help implement these kinds of massive changes. So what I would say to you is learn, embrace AI. It doesn't matter what skill set you're at. If you're in any kind of leadership position or you want to get into a leadership position, you've got to be able to understand it at a high level and comfortable enough to talk about it, and be able to bring some real innovative ideas to the table, but also be a real expert, I would say, in change management and people management to help them to make the change. So you would probably sit in between the business and IT and help with those changes within companies and corporations. In terms of titles that are coming out new with lots of job growth, AI ethics officers, that makes sense. We've got auditors, right? Now we need an AI kind of person in there to make sure that everything is operating smoothly. AI systems managers, data analysts, and data scientists are going to be really, really huge in playing this whole piece out. So in terms of, tips and tricks and where's my job going and how's this all going to work out, I would say, again, to recap, embrace AI, do what I did. Go take a bunch of classes, and I mean a bunch, and be able to understand it really simply. If you can't explain it very simply, you don't understand it. And I think that's important, because if you're interviewing right now, you want to bring up AI in your interviews. You want to bring up you're going to ask them, where are they at in their AI machine learning transformation? How can that impact your job? How can you help them? You want to start to open up those conversations. Candidates that willingly talk openly about AI and machine learning and all of it are going to be more sought after than the ones that don't, that are, shrinking back and afraid and pulling back. You don't have to be a technical whiz at it either. You just need to be able to hold a conversation around it in an interview or with your peers where you currently work or what have you. But the best way to do that, I found, was to take a whole bunch of classes and really understand it at a very high level. And then organically, those classes are going to get very detailed. You're going to get into clustering, you're going to get into all kinds of terms and all kinds of other stuff that you probably don't care about or need to know. You don't even need to know it, but it helps you to be able to understand what's going on around you. Once you understand what's going on around you, you will not be so afraid. And that's the biggest thing. If you're having a big emotional reaction about the change, the best thing you can do is educate yourself and get a plan and move yourself forward. Because the bottom line is we're in evolution. And, the ones that buck the trend and didn't want to do evolution, they don't make it. I mean, whether it's in the workplace or it's a dinosaur, it's not going to work. So you've got to get to this place where emotionally you feel okay about all the change that's going on around you and to be able to manage that. So I would say embrace AI, develop AI resistant skills. Well, what's that, Elizabeth? Well, people skills, frankly, communication skills, change management skills, process skills, heavy duty process skills, because you're looking at processes going, what can I automate? Can I automate it supervised or unsupervised machine learning? Can I stick something like that in there? Do we really need 20 people doing VLOOKUPs in Excel? No, you don't. So that could be automated. Maybe you don't need that team doing that anymore. It's worth looking at. It's worth talking about. It's worth that kind of innovation. And just continue learning about it so that you're not afraid of it as we go on. I just put on my LinkedIn an article of, where the jobs would be and where they wouldn't be. So I'm constantly looking at headlines and trying to just stay on top of it as best I can with the time I have during the day. But the biggest thing I can tell you is because of that willingness to go take 6 weeks and, again, conservatively 15 to 20 hours of classes, I'm no longer afraid at all because I understand it. And I also understand what to be afraid of, frankly, in the algorithms and so forth. So that kind of wraps up my presentation. I wanted to end with this final slide because there's some really great articles or classes or what have you. The links here, they're hyperlinked. You can get right into these articles where I pulled some of my data. But I thought this would be just a nice giveaway just to start you off. And again, very simply explain what all this is. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for having me.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So folks, we are at the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please post your questions and comments in the live chat or comment section, and we'll load them on the stream for Elizabeth to answer. We did receive some questions early in the webinar that might have already been answered during the discussion, but we'll go ahead and address them again for our viewers who tuned in later or need a refresher. So Elizabeth, first question from our audience members. Let's see. So our audience member Tim asked earlier in the webinar, what do you think of logistics automation? Any thoughts?
Yeah, you probably wouldn't like my thought, Tim, but I love it. I like it. Here's what I would say. I'm a business person at my heart. So I like the fact that we could have warehouses with robots and not have people with repetitive injuries and workman comp claims and, frankly, low-end skills that aren't going to go anywhere, and they're not going to park themselves in their jobs and wear their bodies out. So I'm all for it. I'm all for it for the big companies too, because I think the savings is so dramatic. You can't not say no. You can't not say no at some point. It's too much. Are we talking an Amazon? I mean, you're talking about a small warehouse down the street. You can't say no. It's so much cheaper. Now, what I would say is, everybody better get into the trades. So plumbing, roofing, HVAC. I mean, but I still need a guy to get up there and look at my HVAC. I mean, the robot might climb up to my attic, but it's not going to diagnose and do the stuff. So I would say like a lot of those jobs, they get upskilled and they move into trades. And I highly recommend people look at trades because that stuff is not going away. And it can be a lot of fun and extremely lucrative, frankly. Oop, you're on mute. There.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and thank you, Tim, for the question. Next question from our audience members. Let's see. Our audience member asked, are weather forecasting models considered as machine learning models?
I don't know. That's a great question. There might be another technologist that has that expertise with us that could actually answer that. Could be. I mean, when you think about it, it could be because they're predicting out what could happen. The funniest thing is recently, the last few months, my husband said something is up with the weathermen because they do this like teaser and they keep saying, you have to come back. You have to download the app. You have to do this. So they're trying to get people to pull back into their news station. So I don't know. There might be something up there. It's a great question. I don't know the answer to it.
And folks, if there are any experts on that, feel free to chime in
Absolutely.
the chat section.
Yeah, absolutely.
This next question, let's see.
It's a great question. I'll tell you why. You start to look at the world differently. You start to look at the world and go, oh, wait a minute. This is that. So on that, Fred, what you will see now if you're applying for jobs is you'll see chatbots. This is the year of the chatbot, man. You're going to see all this automation in you applying to a job right now.
So this question from our audience member, can you please give me an AI roadmap? Might need a little bit more information.
Okay, I don't understand the question. And I don't even know if I'd be able to answer it truly.
No problem. Alka, if you can just briefly give us more of an explanation, I think we can definitely try and answer that question. But thanks for the question. So Tim asked, and it's probably a response to your the previous question answer. How do I increase logistics automation for off-planet enterprises? Maybe off-planet enterprises?
I don't understand that question. How do I increase logistics automation for off-planet enterprises? I don't, you'd have to add more detail there, Tim. I don't understand what you mean by off-planet enterprises.
Let's see. This question from our audience member. Do you mention that you took some courses in AI?
Yeah.
What criteria did you use to select those courses?
That's a great question. That I can answer for you. So I'm very picky and discriminatory about what information I take in. So the first thing I wanted to do was find just very broad, like what is AI basic 101 class. And then what I really dug into was what are the executives reading? What classes are they taking? If I'm a CISO, what do they know? Like they have to go in, they don't know all of this. They're a CISO, they're a cyber guy, gal at the top, right? They don't know algorithms and machine learning. They might come out of a threat hunt background. I'm like, what are those guys reading? Because that's what I want to read. So that's what started me there. And then I wanted like a good technologist. And if I could get a certification, that was nice, but it wasn't hardcore. But when I started the blanket of what is AI for executives, that sort of content, then I naturally went down into the next class I could handle was like a machine learning class. And then I started to really dig into the ethics. And that's where I'm at now. I've taken one class, but I definitely want to take some more. And then I looked for somebody that could very, very simply explain it. And that's where you start. And then if you find something that's really interesting, then take the next class and dive in on that specific. Would be what I would say. So I jumped off from there and went right into like automation and cyber kinds of articles and looking at algorithms there and looking at experts on LinkedIn that had opinions on that. And I tripped and fell and all of a sudden I'm following their feeds and I got all kinds of information on, what's going on with cybersecurity as it relates to automation, machine learning, and AI.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thank you for audience member and for your great question. Oh, so we did get a little bit more. No, did get a response regarding the machine weather forecasting model and machine learning.
All
Our audience
right.
member
I love
Enzo
this
said,
group.
if you train an algorithm with past weather data, then by definition you have a machine learning weather model. So really appreciate that
Agreed.
uh, that
Agreed.
answer.
Yeah, I would agree. If you did train the model like that, it's gonna do that.
And oh, so Tim did clarify regarding his question before on logistics automation. So he did mean off-planet. Where? Sorry, let me just find his comment. So by off-planet, he means space strips to the moon,
Yeah.
Mars, other planets. So I guess the question is, how do you increase the automation for that? Elizabeth, if you happen to have any
Yeah,
idea.
I don't know that space, but we certainly see that kind of robotics all the time going up to space. We see it all the time. And so how I would imagine that would continue to increase. There's a lot of, emphasis on the environment and some theories about, well, if we dump all over this planet, we can all move to Mars. That might make sense at some point. So all those robotics are going to play a big part in it. I think, just going back down to planet Earth, you're going to see a lot of those robotics again in any kind of logistics driving too. One of the reports I read before I came on the call was, again, reports saying like Uber cars and buses and trains. That would make sense. Like a train would make sense because you've got a track. Those sorts of things you're going to start to see, robotics play a part in it, or full blown machine learning, where those jobs have higher risk. So, for instance, if you work for the transit, train in New York City, that job may end up going full blown machine learning and, be very safe and fine to do that. So that was another area where they were, it's considered high risk, possible job loss skill set.
Awesome, thank you, Elizabeth. And I do see a discussion going on in the chat section. Really great to see it. All right, let's see. So, Elizabeth, this next question, our audience member Mark asked, "How can executives use Gen AI for their work?"
I think that's the looming question to keep your job. That's exactly the question, Mark. I want you to get up and think about that every single day and think about, how can I automate anything? Start with automation. Like what's a simple repetitive task in my team that I could automate? What's a simple repetitive task that actually wouldn't destroy 10,000 jobs either? Just start small, and I'm sure it's there. The best example is the example I gave you earlier in the call, where I know a company that has a team and they have literally like 10 analysts, and all they're doing is poring over Excel spreadsheets, and they're doing VLOOKUPs and, over and over and over again, that kind of repetitive task. And, it's not necessary. When you look at some of the data classification, when you look at some of the data classification, really, DLP, you can automate that in a way, not full-blown machine learning, but automate that. So like if the document is this, yes, no, then this. Then if the document does this, yes, no, then this. So that's a way that documents and data can actually be protected in a company. Cyber is really all about that now, and looking at that very carefully. And it makes more sense to do that, right? Especially when you have a bank or financial services or fintech companies, you've got a lot of data, or healthcare, a lot of very sensitive data. How do you protect that? That would be a way to do it. But I'm not kidding you. Everybody on this call, every day, I want you to ask yourself, I'm an executive. How can I use Gen AI for my work? What great thing could I come to the table with this week and talk to my boss about? What idea could I possibly have? It's that kind of willingness that frankly keeps you employed. And even if it didn't, which it would, you're going to be that sought out candidate because you can already talk about that, right? So you can't be afraid about job loss and skill loss. We want to tap into positive innovation, and that's really where we want to be with this. It's a great question. You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I was saying, thank you, Mark. And I did see a response in the chat as well. Gen AI can be used to search for possible solutions to a variety of problems. Great insight. Thanks so much to our audience members. We did get a couple questions earlier in the live stream asking if this webinar will be available afterwards, the recording. So folks, this webinar will be archived on our Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn pages afterwards, which that has also been included at the bottom of the screen. And you can all access that recording post live stream through the same links that you used to access today's webinar. So really appreciate you all joining us today. Next question. Audience member asks, what frameworks or guidelines do you recommend for responsible AI adoption?
Nobody can say that. That's a very personal. You're going to have to take some ethics classes. There are theories around that, and then everybody's got an opinion on that. Do I hit the dog, the person, or go off the cliff with the car? There's no. There isn't a standard. I can tell you that right now. There isn't a standard. It's not even a standard by industry. It's not like, okay, for healthcare, this is what we do. This is what we do for healthcare to protect our data and make sure that if we have machine learning, that right decisions are being made and people aren't dying in hospitals and getting their claims denied or getting cancer and not knowing it or whatever it is, right? There isn't any of that. The best I can tell you is those classes are so interesting. Take a couple of those classes and understand some of the high level theories in it. And then as you're working, kind of get an ear to the ground, like, what is my company doing with this? Because I think it's important as we all work and choose our employers and got to get a paycheck somewhere. What is my company about? What are they doing? What do they believe in? Even that lawsuit I saw at Humana, it's just, I told my friend, because you should just know what's going on. So it does start with those ethics, though.
For sure. I mean, like you said, there definitely is no there is no guideline or one answer about this, especially since it's such a new territory. It's a huge booming territory, but and this is also the reason why the government is still trying to figure out how to regulate AI. So many companies need to find a way to adopt it, and just no one knows what to do quite yet. So really appreciate the insight. Our audience member Mahesh, hope that I'm pronouncing it right, asked, what are some of the AI use cases in manufacturing quality control that are working well? Any examples?
Yeah, I don't know, Mahesh, because I'm not in that space. And years ago, I was in more of a manufacturing and had my finger on that pulse. I don't know at this point. If somebody else on the call can share, because that might be proprietary, feel free to comment.
And I'm sure there's plenty of information on that online. If you just search up, I'm sure there are plenty of case studies regarding this as well. Appreciate the question, Mahesh. Audience member Deep Space asked, regarding cleaning the data, like removing outliers, etc., what's the boundary or who decides that so we don't overdo it?
Yeah, I'm not a data scientist. I'm guessing from the research I did, part of it is going to be the data scientist. The objectives of the goal is going to be important. Like, what are we trying to do, right? Did we solve that? That's the basics of it. And then when they look at that data, that team would decide. And ultimately, from what I've read and then what I've experienced personally within this topic, your technical team advises, your business gets involved and sees if it makes sense. But who has that ultimate say? I don't know. Earlier in the call, though, I did mention one of the new job growth titles is going to be AI ethics officer. So ethics officer would, as that job title and the qualifications and all that comes about, that person would definitely weigh in and may sign off on that. I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And a really great question. Thank you. Our next audience member question, what are your thoughts on cyber/AI's current level of development in the public realm?
Yeah, that I can answer somewhat. I'm watching that very carefully because it's going to affect job titles and skills and duties. And so, and then it starts to get into, when you talk about the public realm, we're talking about, we could keep going back to data privacy, right? Now we're getting to things like DeepSeek, right? So, you know, that's a concern. I mean, to me, the data privacy is a concern. And to me, when we get into cyber, I really hone in on threat hunting, red team, blue team, purple team, lessons learned. We have a breach. You know, how will AI impact that? How can it help that? How can it solve that? How can we find things in the system quicker, faster, better, and get on top of it? The problem now is there's alarms going off all the time in cyber, and there's so many alarms, nothing's important. It's like screaming above the noise. And so that to me is a real concern. And so I always wonder, like a simple security analyst, how much of that job can be automated safely? And then the question prior, what are the boundaries around that? At what point have we gone too far? I think that's also a question I have. So I'm watching that very carefully, because that's going to impact who I hire, and helping like everybody on the call saying, hey, you know, Python skills, scripting is good, Bash, Shell, that's all automation stuff. That's stuff you want to know. So it helps me to pass along that knowledge to others. So I'm watching it. I don't have any true answers there.
Thanks for the great question. I see that we have IEEE member Ebony Walker joining us today. Great to hear from you again. Concerning bias, will we have found ways to augment our data sets, or just, I'm guessing she meant to ask, will we have to find ways to augment our data sets, or just the algorithm to account for historical hiring practices, or is there no way around the bias?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that goes back to early in the call, I said, fundamentally, loosely, there are, say, a handful, 5 basic algorithms. And so that gets plunked in there, and then you tweak it from there. So I don't know. Obviously they couldn't at that time when that lawsuit came out. Now maybe they can, right? Now maybe they can allow for that a little bit more. It's the same way with credit card applications. I read something, it was like somebody was denied their credit card application, and they were clearly married to somebody else who made the same amount of money. So why was the females denied and not the males? And it was the kludgy in the algorithm that caused that. So they were discriminating against women. So, you know, I think it goes back down to the algorithm, and can the data scientists tweak it enough to allow for the outliers? I mean, the history is what the history is. We can't clean that up. That is what it is. So then it becomes, can we tweak that model? And I don't think we know yet. I can tell you this in hiring, and I think this is worth bringing up. This is very important. A person reads your resume. None of us go into work right now and open up our desk and the computer goes, Elizabeth, call these 10 candidates. These are the most qualified for your role. You have to call these first. That's not happening. It's not embedded in Taleo or Workday. It's not. A person opens up a rec every morning, reads every resume. So that's where we're at. It's not being implemented there at all. Amazon did that to try something, and it backfired, and they removed it immediately. But anybody that's in job search, I think that's a real concern right now. Like, the bots are going to take over and you're not going to get a chance. And it's not what's happening. And I can tell you very factually, it is not running in any ATS due to bias and discrimination. So rest assured, if you're applying for work, you're being considered fairly and equitably. Also, I would say this, we're still very much interested in hiring the most qualified person. We're very much interested in that. And so that's never going away, never. So it's a great question, but I don't see that this is fixed here yet, and I don't know that it could be. I actually had a very high level vice president, machine learning guy look at my slides before I delivered this is my first run through this presentation. And I said, please tell me if I said anything silly here, because I will just die in front of these technologists. I'd be so embarrassed. And he read all of it and he said, no, everything here is accurate. And what you're explaining at a simple level is very accurate. And so, like I said, the algorithm is the algorithm, and then somebody's got to go in and tweak it. You can't rewrite the history. But can they tweak it to that point? Not yet. Otherwise, I think we would be running it, right? I think that would be what it would be.
Definitely. Thank you for that insight, Elizabeth. And like you said, I mean, we're not at that point yet. Doesn't mean that it's not possible. I mean, again, this is such new territory. So, I mean, at this point, anything's possible, but who knows? Well, we'll see when we get there. Thanks for the great question, Ebony. Regarding this question from earlier from our audience member, Alka, on the AI roadmap, so I guess, Elizabeth, could you kind of describe some of the major AI tools that are already out there that people might be using? Where would you start? I'm guessing for maybe, for example, for someone who doesn't have any knowledge in any AI tools. And
yeah. So, Alka, I don't have that information. That's not my space. My space is more cyber right now, or machine learning as it relates to cyber. What I would say, what I would advise you is just do a very simple Google search and start there. The second thing I would do is I would take whatever programs and languages that they bring up. I would immediately go into YouTube and see if there's some person talking about it, or a class, or a big overview, just so you can get your hands around it and kind of get your head around what they are. But I mean, just very simply Google, like, what are the most sought after tools in this space? Do it a couple of times, read 5-6 articles. It's all going to cross-reference the top 3. Then go off and look at that. But the most important thing I could tell you is talk to people, right? So look at colleges. What courses are they offering? Colleges are one piece, but really talk to technologists, meet some data scientists, meet people in that space, meet them in different industries. When you get into banking and financial, there, or healthcare, where you've got tons of data, the cutting edge tools that they're using are going to be different, or could be not as cutting edge as maybe manufacturing or retail or what have you. So learn what you can, but I highly encourage you, talk to people that are in the field and ask them, because they really know what's hot and cutting edge and what is not.
Hope that answers your question or gave you a little bit of insight, Alka, and thanks for the question. This is a pretty great question from audience member Mark. How would you approach an old school CEO on the benefits of incorporating Gen AI into the business?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the simplest thing, that's the most obvious thing, is a great way to approach it and find benefits. So I know I keep saying the words repetitive task. Go in your IT department and say, hey, what's some report that you run all the time that drives you nuts? And like 6 people have to see it, and then it runs up to me. Like, can we automate any of this? Ask some of the people where you work. When I think about automation, even very simply, forms, call center people, IT processes, patches. IT people have to do software patches. Think about those skill sets. Think about maybe big skill sets, and then go into those departments and ask them, what is something repetitive here that we might be able to automate? And how would we do that? And then be a business person and say, how much time would that save us? Is it worth it? And that's how I would honestly approach it.
Really great question. Thanks, Mark. So, folks, we are approaching the end of the hour, and I know we haven't gotten to a lot of questions. Apologies. We'll try. We'll probably take a couple more, but we bring Elizabeth for our webinar. We invite her to our webinars fairly often, and this is such a huge topic that I think we may do a continuation depending on your feedback. If you really like this, definitely let us know either in the chat or in the feedback survey that we send out afterwards. But Elizabeth, so we'll probably wrap it up at this one last question.
Sure. And I had one other thing before you take that question. I wanted to remind everybody, if you haven't seen me speak before at the IEEE, always for the IEEE, I offer, if you're on job search, you want me to review your resume, you have a couple of career questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Best place to reach me, go to lionsology.com and you can contact me through there, and then we can set up time to talk. Even if it's AI related, like, this is really scaring me, what do you think? Or I have to prepare for an interview, what should I ask them? Or, it can be anything, job or career related, but I always do that just to support the group and, to help you. I'm a business person. You've all been very gracious. You're very smart technologists. I gave the best offering I could today from a business perspective. And that might help you in your job search or as you're learning these conversations. But I appreciate some of you were really gentle with me with the questions, because some of it I just don't know. This is meant to just be a very high level presentation. So we can take the last question now.
And folks, in case you need the link to Elizabeth's website, we've included at the bottom of the screen. Definitely reach out to her for a consultation. So this last question, Mark asks, do you agree with Sam Altman in Germany this week that DeepSeek is way overhyped?
No, I don't like the whole thing where you go in there and they tell you right away that your data isn't your data. You have no protection. It's in some other country on some other server. The whole thing makes my stomach hurt, because at the end of the day, it's like 100 times worse than TikTok, like 1 trillion times worse than TikTok, in my opinion. And I just, I think like the normal person just sees the shiny thing and goes running at it and clicks, I don't care, take my data, I have nothing to hide. And that's just not, that makes my stomach hurt. You ask me what I think. I don't think it's overhyped, because I understand the fundamentals of it. I do want to make one comment on that. The biggest thing I've learned the last 2 months is what you all know and you're all very good at, which is root cause analysis and going to the source. And I think that when you read DeepSeek, when you even read politics right now, there's just these like sound bites, or AI or any of it. You just read this thing, but we don't trace it back to the root. And we just look at these blanket statements like DEI is canceled and we all get upset, or DeepSeek is the worst thing, we all get, or it's the best thing, or whatever it is. I think it really takes going right back into what is it, very simply, and picking a really good source, because there's so many sources out there, it's hard to tell. So even going on the DEI topic for 1 minute, I actually read the executive orders. I bet you 1,000 people on this call did not read the executive order. Like, read them. Like what are we really doing when it comes to, he's got a policy on AI. He's got a policy on this. Like, read the executive orders, go to the source. And what you find is, it's just like me taking 20 hours of classes. It's not so scary anymore, because I'm not freaked out. And I thought, to be really honest with you, I thought I was very intelligent, and I took my news from both sides, no matter what the subject was, whether it's deep fake or AI or political. I thought I had high level of discernment. And what I found was I didn't. But when I went to the source, like, who's saying this? What is this really? Then I can make my own decisions around it, right? Rather than just jumping on the bandwagon of another opinion. I didn't even realize I was doing that. So I think that's the biggest thing I learned was go to the source. You guys are all really smart, root cause analysis kinds of people. So before you take something in, where is this coming from? And can you chase that down the rabbit hole further to really get to pure information? And then you can decide.
Really great insight. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. All right, everyone. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we could go on and on about this. It's such a huge topic. I think we definitely can tell that from our audience members that they're very engaged in this. So I think we may do a continuation of this sometime in the future. But Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today and providing your expert insights into how we can leverage AI to really lead change.
Yeah, and not be afraid. That's my big thing, is like, I just don't want anybody afraid of it, because it's going to happen anyway, right? And I just think you will not be afraid if you understand it, even really simply.
For sure. I mean, it's here. We might as well try to embrace it because it's probably not going to go away anytime soon.
No, it's not. And then you can make good career decisions. You can make good continuing education decisions. I mean, like I said to Alka, it's like, I don't want you to learn all this stuff and then find out the people doing the jobs, they don't even use that tool anymore, right? So the more that you can understand, then you can make decisions and have a good path with it. That my whole intention was to really minimize the fear around this topic. And because I was there myself, really.
For sure. And I'm sure many other people are just the same way as well. This was probably very much more common than we may realize.
Sure.
And thank you to our audience members for tuning in, for your great questions as well. A few announcements before we close things off today. First up, the application deadline for the Washington Internships for Students of Engineering, or WISE internship, has been extended to this Friday, February 14th. This great program is open to both undergraduate and graduate students and offers a unique opportunity to learn how the government tackles complex technological issues and how engineers and scientists can really influence the legislative and regulatory decision-making processes. So if you're a student or know someone who is eager to understand the policy-making process and wants to network with influential figures in their field in government, this is definitely an opportunity you don't want to miss. Next up, registration for our 2025 IEEE-USA Congressional Visits Day, which will be held April 8th through the 9th, is open. CVD is an annual event that brings IEEE members to Washington, D.C. to raise visibility of and support for engineering and technology. It's a rare chance to introduce yourself, your colleagues, your company, and your profession to our elected officials. It's also a great opportunity to discuss legislation and issues that are uniquely important to IEEE members. Finally, some exciting news for aspiring cybersecurity leaders. The Nexus Cyber Institute, a collaborative effort between IEEE-USA and Boots to Cyber, is dedicated to addressing America's growing need for skilled and accredited cybersecurity professionals, and will be hosting a Certified Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, training in Huntsville, Alabama from March 24th to 27th. This executive leader level program is designed for professionals aiming to excel in the highest echelons of the information security field, and you definitely don't want to miss this chance to enhance your expertise and become a leader in cybersecurity. So register now to secure your spot as soon as possible. If you enjoyed the content presented in today's webinar, be sure to check out our other extensive catalogs of other presentations and publications available on demand, on our website for your viewing pleasure. And finally, if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe to our social media updates, and don't forget to social media channels, and don't forget to check back daily on our for updates on our upcoming events. Have a great day, everyone.
I had the coolest job that any electrical engineer could ever have on the ground crew for Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world only using the power of the sun. IEEE-USA has given me a competitive edge because of their support system. It is so much easier doing something and being out of your comfort zone when you have someone there saying, "You got this." IEEE-USA is more than just a network. It's a family.